This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, the 10 top facts about the Russia-Ukraine war. With us this evening, Trevor Loudon, a public speaker, a political activist, and the author of several books, including his new book, White House Reds. Trevor, what an honor to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Oh, it's always great, Jamie. Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Well, Trevor, very difficult issue here. So many complexities. Perhaps you and I may agree to disagree on a few things. We'll see what happens here. But the conservative camp has kind of splintered on this Russia-Ukraine thing. You've got, we were unified there, on some degree, realms anyway, because there was, the Klaus Schwab and the George Soros globalists that had locked us down, and they want to create the New World Order, and we were together against them, and we still are. But this Russia-Ukraine thing is now happening, and there's a lot of conservatives who think that somewhere Putin is continuing Trump's battle against the globalists. That's one thing that's confusing thing. At the same time, we don't want to minimize some of the bad forces that might be existing on the quote-unquote Ukraine side. So let's get to all of that. Before we do, would you like to give a little comment about what I've just said?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jamie. When the invasion started, it was pretty black and white. A lot of people saw this as a big country taking down another country. But since that time, the water has been muddied. There's a lot of propaganda floating out there. There's a whole bunch of memes that you've seen. But this has been set up for a few years. The meme that Putin is a Christian and fighting the New World Order has been going on for some time now. It's just come in stark relief since this invasion.
Well, look, Trevor, absolutely. So let's just begin. We're going to break it down in my top 10 facts, which really are just 10 themes, but maybe some truths will come out with your expertise. So let's just start, and it will help us with our discussion. Number 10, Stockholm Syndrome with Putin. Trevor, so as I said, there is somewhere where a lot of people in our camp, and look, I love Trump. I thought Trump was great. I think Trump is still great. And definitely he was in the way of the globalists, of what they're trying to do. All of them, Fauci, Gates, Soros, Schwab, this individual Harari, everything that they want to do. And Trump was in their way because he was looking out for America, and they clearly want to create this globalist network. And I think a lot of them are projecting somewhere they have this feeling that Putin is now taking on the globalists. And they're transferring their hopes of Trump onto Putin. Somewhere that Putin, and how can Putin possibly be our friend? This is an ally of China. And when we're talking about KGB, this is the epicenter of the enemy of Christianity and the Judeo-Christian tradition. Let you take it away now.
Yeah, and that's 100% right, Jamie. So, but this has been set up for a long time now. This has been coming through sites like Alex Jones and Michael Savage, and in more recent times through QAnon, and even through Tucker Carlson. You got this meme out there that Putin is a Christian. Putin is going to save us from the Muslims and the radical homosexual lobby. Putin stands for family values, and Putin hates the New World Order because he has criticized George Soros, and we don't like George Soros, so therefore he's our friend. Well, we've just had the deep state. People need to understand the deep state. If you look at, the deep state is essentially Russian. The deep state is Russian and Chinese, and they have spun it. See, the Russians and the Chinese have always had the American left on their side. But they needed more than the left. They needed the right too, or at least to neutralize the right. So they've been putting together these family values conferences for the last 15 years, inviting prominent US social conservatives to them. You know, conservatives will tell you that Putin is a lion of Christianity, that Putin's invasion of Ukraine is to fulfill biblical prophecy. And through QAnon and others, I've got a whole bunch of people convinced that Putin's going to save us from the New World Order. And they got to understand the New World Order is communism. And Putin is still a communist. And he's allied formally in a military, political, economic alliance with communist China. It's called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which has been in place since 2001. So, look, for example, you know, Putin did a conference in October 2017 at Sochi, Russia, where they held the Winter Olympics. And he had 30,000 kids from all over the world at this big youth conference, cheering him on, loving Putin, clapping him, adoring him. He's like a rock star. He keynoted it, he organized it, got them all together. This was 30,000 young communists from all over the world, including America, there to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. And Putin told these kids, the future is yours, go for it. You know, this man has been scamming Western conservatives and Christians for 15 years, trying to get them to think he's one of them. He's
Right.
Absolutely the enemy.
Right. And Trevor, oftentimes there's also a complexity of when there's evil that's against evil on many levels. Like, for instance, Stalin versus Hitler. And let's say that there is this LGBTQ destructive agenda against God's creation, against the Judeo-Christian tradition, etc. And yes, I'm sure that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda would be against some of those things. But that doesn't mean, right, but it doesn't mean that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are our friends. So this gets quite complicated, and we will continue to discuss these themes as we go forward. Number 9, the aggression of NATO, ? So ever since 2014, you know, there was the uprising in Ukraine, if that's one way to describe it. Yanukovych took off, the pro-Russian president took off somewhere. So there was a kind of a freedom movement, and Ukrainians want to be part of the West. It appears they want their freedom, and people are entitled to be free if they want to be free. Now, the other argument is, how would the United States like it if Canada or Mexico joined the Warsaw Pact? Okay, one could make an argument there somewhere, I guess, that Russia's feeling encircled, Russia's feeling that it's being surrounded by the West, and that in many respects NATO and the West has provoked this war with this quote-unquote threat that Ukraine is slowly becoming a member of NATO. Is there any argument to be made for Russia there, which a lot...
Yeah, well, it's a doctrine of moral equivalence. You know, they're saying that, well, because, you know, they're trying to compare America and Russia as though they're comparable countries. One's good, one's ruled by evil. It's like the old evil empire, you know. Well, okay, Russia is in Cuba. Russia is in Nicaragua. Russia is in Venezuela. Russia is in Mexico. Mexico has a communist president. Canada has a socialist president who's in bed with China. We are encircled right now. They are in our hemisphere right now. So why was NATO set up? It was set up to stop Russia, Soviet Union, conquering all of Europe. That's why it was set up. It was a purely defensive network. And when the countries of Eastern Europe broke free of the Soviet Union after 40 years of slavery, where their people were put in gulags, where their people were shot for trying to get out of the country, where they lived in poverty for years, many of them tried to get into NATO because that was the only protection they had against another Russian reinvasion. So, you know, why doesn't Ukraine have a right to defend itself and ally with friends who will protect it from an evil neighbor? Why doesn't Finland have a right to defend itself against and have allies against an evil neighbor. Finland's already had one unprovoked attack from Russia in the 1939. Why isn't Sweden got a right to stand with America, stand with Britain, stand with Germany against Russia? It is a right of self-determination to choose your own allies.
Yeah, and Trevor, it's so interesting how when somebody speaks the truth, they can crystallize through these smoke and mirrors. Because on the one hand, it sounds right. You know, like what if America had, you know, Mexico and the Warsaw Pact, etc. But as you're saying, wait a minute, there's no moral equivalency. One country is a totalitarian entity, another one is a democracy. And you said something else on a show the other day with Jeff Nyquist, fascinating discussion you had with him. But you guys were also saying, if NATO is so dangerous, why isn't Ukraine afraid of NATO?
Well, exactly right, you know. And when has NATO ever invaded a neighboring country? You know, it doesn't. Right. It's purely defensive. Russia has invaded Georgia and the Caucasus. In recent history, it's invaded Czechoslovakia, it's invaded Eastern Europe, it's invaded Finland, and now it's invading a sovereign nation, Ukraine. America, when did America ever invade Canada? You know, there is no moral equivalence here. One is a tyranny ruled by a man who kills his opposition and still puts people in gulags and has 20,000 nukes aimed at this country. Another one is the leader of the free world. Don't people have a right to align with good rather than evil, than be conquered by evil? If I was living in Ukraine, I'd certainly want to be part of NATO.
Thank you, Trevor. Number 8, Putin versus the globalists, ? So we've already touched on some of this. But let me tell you where some of my suspicions are. And there's a few places I don't feel comfortable with some things. So they lock us down, or they try to lock us down for 2 years, try to put face diapers on us, lock us down, try to inject us with these serums, and the global media is telling you, stay home, stay home, stay home. And then the same global media starts putting Ukraine flags into our hands, saying you can cheer on Ukraine now. Ukraine is the good guy. Zelensky is the good guy. Putin is the bad guy. Now I know that even if evil people say 2 + 2 is 4, you don't say, no, it's 5 just to oppose bad people. So, but there is something a little bit suspicious there, because if Klaus Schwab and George Soros, and we know that this Zelensky character and Ukraine to some degree are part of this whole World Economic Forum network, something's a little bit troubling there, isn't it?
Well, see, nobody wants to be on the same side as Nancy Pelosi, do they? You know, right. So, but here's how I see it. Putin is the new world order. Putin and China are the enforcement arms of this. Putin has been involved in the new economic forum, the World Economic Forum, for 20 years. He has had personal meetings with Klaus Schwab. Russia has been involved right from the very beginning. As far as we know, Zelensky's been to one meeting. Look, Donald Trump's been to one meeting of the WEF. Ivanka Trump is a global world leader. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, I believe, was a young global world leader. Vladimir Putin was as well. So it's not quite as black and white as you would think. But here's the thing. What they're doing is they're basically, Russia and China are the enforcement wing of the global movement. You know, Klaus Schwab doesn't have a bust of Lenin in his office on his bookcase behind him for nothing. He is a communist. He is a full-on communist, and he's just kicked Putin out of the World Economic Forum because they had to. Well, and Soros says he wants Putin assassinated and Xi assassinated. Look, George Soros has worked in the interests of the Russians and the Chinese his entire career. He was a Nazi collaborator as a young man. You know, he used to go around with his stepfather confiscating Jewish property for the Nazis in Hungary. Yet when the Soviet Red Army invaded, when they were hanging Nazis from the lampposts and sending them to Siberia, he was allowed to leave Soviet-occupied Hungary and travel through Soviet-occupied Austria out to the West. How would you do that had you not made a deal with the Soviet authorities? And then since that time, he's been out there trying to trash Israel, trying to trash Britain, trying to trash the United States. But we all think Putin's our friend because Putin hates him. Well, of course, Putin's going to hate him because it deflects a lot of what he's doing onto this demon, George Soros. George Soros is just a cog in the machine. I think there's a big fat KGB file on Soros. But this is the other thing. The left are virtue signaling like crazy. We're standing up for right. We're standing up for Ukraine. Ukraine's great. It's all perfect. And we got people on the right actively either excusing what Russia's doing and in some cases actually cheering them on.
Right.
The articles that come, they are setting us up to be labeled as pro-Putin traitors. The right, the conservatives, Christians are going to be labeled as pro-Putin traitors, and that's going to justify crackdowns on our movement. We are being led into a trap by some of our people like Alex, or people like Alex Jones and others who are going, rah, 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 Putin. Putin's a great man. He's a Christian. He doesn't put up with the gays and the Muslims. We are being led right into a trap, just like we were with Charlottesville, just like we were with January the 6th, only this one will be worse.
Thank you, Trevor. And you always crystallize these things so precisely and powerfully because, when I am studying these things and then when you're reading a lot of that other literature, that's maybe pro-Putin against the globalists, that argument, and then I begin to think, and as you point out very concretely, who is responsible for corrupting the globalists with Marxism? Because they're Marxists. Well, the KGB does that, and that's Putin. So the deep state is communist. Putin is a communist. They're not in conflict, and Putin is the ultimate globalist. And so that framework that the pro-Putin or anti-Ukraine people are building is not necessarily straight thinking. I'm just thinking, because my parents are from there, and my life is dedicated to fighting the idea that caused the murder of 40, 50 million of my people and of the killing of my family. And we realize that the people, the forces that destroyed all the churches, that killed all the Christians, that persecuted the Jewish people, that persecuted all the people in general, this is the KGB, this is Putin.
Yeah, this is exactly right. Russia today, and people don't like to hear this, is a continuation of the Soviet Union. The same KGB that was in control then is in control now, only it's way bigger, much better armed. In the old day, there was tension between the party and the civil government and the KGB. The KGB runs everything. Now the FSB or GRU, the intelligence services completely run Russia. Putin serves at their pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. So let's go to number 7. The Nazis in Ukraine militias. So, okay, I'm constantly, no matter what I do, there's going to be those people that hate me and they're unsubscribing. They can't believe I brought into this propaganda. So I'm always being accused of dismissing one thing or another. But, recently we had a guest on, they gave the pro-Russia position to some degree. Then we had other guests that did the opposite with you today. And we're going to have other guests on soon that are, we're going to see what they have to say from the other side. What am I saying here? Okay, so this is the concrete thing here. So I'm getting a lot of mail saying, Jamie, you've been brainwashed. You're dismissing this issue of the Nazis and the Ukraine militias. Let me get this to you with Trevor, because after we discuss this, let us even suppose that this is true, that there are some ugly elements in the Ukraine militias, there are Nazis there, and they do bad things. My question is, how does this make the Ukraine thirst for freedom wrong? How does it make Putin good? This isn't necessarily such a simple issue, right?
Yeah, well, I'll give you my explanation here. Okay, all you Trump supporters out there watching this, what has the left been calling you for the last 5 years? They've been calling you white supremacists, right? They've been calling you fascists, sometimes even Nazis. Trump supporters have been getting this for 5 years. Trump's been called a Nazi, a fascist, a racist, a horrible person. What have they been calling Israel for the last 10 years? An apartheid state, a fascist state, an oppressive state. Who's doing this to Ukraine? It's the same communist left that called you Nazis, and Israel Nazis are now calling Ukraine Nazis.
Absolutely. So wait, now Trevor, so we know Putin is involved in this propaganda and we know how they like to call everybody Nazis. But there is this reality called the Azov Battalion, these people working with Zelensky. They go back to Stepan Bandera. There's a wide collaboration to some respect with Nazis. So there is a reality here to some degree. And I'm suspicious that the Western media, why don't we just deal with this? Like MSNBC, Fox News, have a show on this. Invite some people, talk about it. Let's get this out in the open.
We need the history. See, when Ukraine was, in the 1930s, the Soviets went into the Ukraine and starved the whole nation, killing 3 to 10 million people. They took all the food out. So a few years later, the Nazis invaded Ukraine, and some Ukrainians welcomed the Nazis to liberate them from the communists, because the communists had wiped them out. Well, there were Nazis in Ukraine, yes, like Bandera. He spent a lot of time in Nazi jails, but he did collaborate. But they did in Romania too. They did in France. They did in Holland. Norway had a Nazi government under Vidkun Quisling, where the word Quisling comes from. They did it all over Europe. There were Nazis in every country in Europe who collaborated, often because they saw the Nazis as a lesser evil than the communists. Now, I'm not saying this is right, but when you're desperate, you'll go for any help you can get. So there was that Nazi element back then. You have the Azovs now. The Nazis in Ukraine get roughly 2% of the vote. The semi-Nazis get about 2% of the vote in the Ukraine. The Azov battalion threatened to kill Zelensky a few years ago when he was trying to rein them in. The Azov battalion is between 800 and 2,500 people, right? And they are fighting in the Ukrainian army in a country of 44 million people.
Right. Okay. So Trevor, I just wish that there wasn't something that looked like a cover-up on this issue, to have more discussions like you're having right now and pointing out these facts. And I think that if you and I live in a building and some creeps move in that like Adolf Hitler, it doesn't mean that we support those people and that we don't deserve to be free, right?
Exactly. Does America deserve a Russian invasion because you have a KKK in America? Does America deserve a Russian invasion because you have a few genuine white supremacists out there? Very few. You got 10 times more communists in America than you have white supremacists. You got 10 times more communists in Ukraine than you have white supremacists. Every country in Europe had Nazis and still does. Ukraine is not a Nazi country. Zelensky, their Jewish president, has 90% approval ratings right now. They know he's Jewish. They don't mind that because they're not Nazis.
Okay. So, Trevor, thank you for crystallizing these things. So we don't want to sweep it under the rug that there's ugly elements in these militias. But the argument could be made, and I think a bright man like you is the one that said it recently in one of your interviews. Who's the biggest Nazi? Putin is. But let me get to this for a minute. We know that this monster Putin actually was behind the bombing of certain apartment buildings in Russia to make it look like the Chechens did it, right? So monsters are capable of monstrous things against their own people. Now, we are hearing that in Bucha and other places, that what the Russians are being blamed for, actually, after they leave and they didn't do the bad things, that it was actually the Nazi elements that come in, they perpetrate the atrocities, and then they blame the Russians. Now, I don't necessarily, this is just something that's out there. A lot of my Ukrainian friends who have relatives are saying this is absolutely BS. But I just want to say that this is one of the things that is being said. And what do you think?
Okay, I saw a little clip the other day, and it had some soldiers and some civilians wearing Ukrainian armbands, blue and yellow armbands, and they were beating civilians. They had people tied up to lampposts and were beating them. What Ukrainian civilian would be stupid enough to get themselves filmed committing war crimes wearing an Ukrainian armband? That is obviously a fake. Now, remember, in 1941, the Russians, the Soviets murdered 20,000 Polish officers in Katyn Forest. They blamed the Nazis for that for over 50 years before they coughed up to it. When the Russians went into East Germany after World War II, they were murdering many people. They're estimated to have raped 2 million women. The Red Army raped 2 million women in peacetime, Austria and Germany. They've committed atrocities in Afghanistan, documented atrocities. They've used chemical weapons. They committed atrocities in the Caucasus, and they always blame someone else. This is what they do. As you said, they blew up apartment buildings in Russian cities and blamed it on the Chechens. They killed their own people to create an excuse to invade that country.
Trevor, I just want to add to that the people that were occupied by the Nazis, they say so many were praying that they would be liberated by American soldiers rather than Russian soldiers for the reasons that you're saying. So look, what I'm saying here is it's so nice to talk to somebody like you, Trevor, but I wish that instead of the accusation being made that there's a cover-up, that MSNBC, now even Fox News, CNN, have a special on the Nazi elements in Ukraine and have somebody like you come on and let's discuss the truth about the Nazis that do exist, and then let's explain it and crystallize things rather than it appearing that there's some kind of dismissing going on or cover-up.
Yeah, we absolutely, because we're not going into these issues, this is enabling the Russians to get away with a lot more propaganda than they should be. We got to understand they've got tens of thousands of people in buildings pumping their memes out onto the internet every single day to muddy the waters about what they're doing. They've got the world's largest propaganda organization, and we've got people all over the internet just lapping this stuff up because it's secret knowledge. This is the real story. Now I know it's gone, because nobody wants to believe what CNN says or the mainstream media, and they're doing it for their own reasons, so they can basically attack us. But the reality is the Russians are committing major atrocities on the ground.
Absolutely. So look, Trevor, the Chilean-American blogger Gonzalo Lira, it appears, it's unconfirmed right now, but he's been abducted, it appears, by this Azov battalion or some bad elements there in the city of Kharkov in Ukraine. So these Nazi elements there are doing bad things. Let's look out for what happened with Gonzalo Lira. And these things should be discussed. But what you're saying and you're emphasizing is, yes, there's bad people everywhere. There's these bad elements in Ukraine. It does not translate into the fact that the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians are loving, freedom-loving people and deserve to be free and independent if they so wish to.
Absolutely. There's never been a war in recorded history that weren't atrocities. But if there are any atrocities being committed by Azov, and I'm yet to see the proof of that, I would tell you they would be outweighed probably 50-1 by the atrocities committed by the Russian army, because that is their policy. This is red terror. This is what they've always done.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the final well, I don't know if it's the final answer, but again, I keep using the word crystallizing things. When we've got those forces that are saying the Nazis in Ukraine, the Nazis in Ukraine, yes, okay, there's an element there, let's discuss it. But in the end, is Ukraine's president really a Nazified Jew? It doesn't add up.
It doesn't look. Zelensky used to be an actor. He used to do TV shows, and one of his shows was called Servant of the People. And if you look it up on Netflix, he used to have conversations, imaginary conversations with Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. He was a big admirer of the American system. You can look it up on Netflix now, but you're not going to hear much about that, because the whole thing is to demonize him as some sort of traitor. The man is standing with his people while the bombs are coming down, and he was offered safe passage, which he didn't take. So he's standing with his people, and we're calling him a Nazi. This brave Jewish man has been called a Nazi. And he is, if Ukraine goes down, we got to understand we're next. Right. The Baltic states are next, then Europe's next. China's going to go into the Pacific. Iran's going to go into the Middle East. North Korea is probably going to attack South Korea. We've got a communist governor. We've got a communist government on the Mexican border who's flooding us with illegals right now, and probably Spetsnaz and terrorists. This is the argument people get. Oh, we shouldn't defend Ukraine's border because we got our own border to worry about. People have got to understand, the same communists who are invading Ukraine's border are the same communists who are driving the invasion across our southern border. It's all the same enemy.
All right. Trevor, look, I think I can still say I have concerns about Zelensky and Ukraine being part of the World Economic Forum objectives, that perhaps Schwab, he's got his puppet in Canada. There's an argument to be made that maybe there's a threat there in some way of what he plans to do with Zelensky in the World Economic Forum. But as you're saying, look, there's gradations of concerns, and none of this negates the fact that there is an immediate monstrous threat from a very evil empire. Things are very confusing. Look, during the Soviet regime, Reagan funded the freedom fighters, quote unquote freedom fighters in Afghanistan. We funded them against the Soviet regime. In the end, it turned out that the money went into some of the people's hands and pockets that ended up perpetrating 9/11. So there is some muddiness, right?
Yeah, there is muddiness, but if you look at the World Economic Forum, Putin and Russia have been involved by a factor of 10 in the World Economic Forum, more than Ukraine has, more than Zelensky has. So, Trump has been to the World Economic Forum. His, Ivanka has been named as a global world leader. So, so she's a Zelensky, she's an acolyte of the world government, is she?
Thank you, Trevor. That's why it's so important to bring these things up with an intelligent truth teller like yourself. Number 6, ethnic cleansing against Russian speakers? ? So there are those that are arguing that there's the Nazis that are involved in a form of quote unquote genocide against Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. At the same time, there's a war going on. People die in wars. There's civilians that die in wars. I think genocide might be a strong term. Ethnic cleansing might be a strong term. 14,000 people, that's a number that's used. It may be exaggerated, I don't know. I wish there was more light brought on this issue than us just not knowing what exactly the facts are. But it's a little bit muddy because who exactly is Russian speaking? What do you think about this main accusation that there's an ethnic cleansing going on and that's part of the reason why Putin went in?
It's a lie. I've spoken to people who have direct talk of people on the ground. There was no persecution of the Russian speakers in Donbass or any of those disputed territories. Look, Zelensky was protecting them. He was he fought to make sure they could speak Russian in those territories, right? What happened in 2014 was simple. Russian troops went into there pretending to be partisans, pretending to be rebels, going in to protect the ethnic Russians from persecution by these imaginary Nazis. It was all a fabrication. And it was spread by the Communist Party of Britain, the Communist Party USA. All these communist publications all through Europe spread this lie. It was a lie. Not saying there was never a single atrocity there at all, but it was instigated against sovereign Ukrainian territory by Russian troops posing as rebels. And they put up communist flags. The Donbass is now a communist republic. Luhansk and Donetsk, they have the Soviet flag. They are actual communists. You really think, see, this is the thing people forget. If you live in Russia, your sons get conscripted into the Russian army. Every young Russian man has to go into the army. If you live in Ukraine, you don't. So do you think all those mothers in Donbass and Luhansk welcomed the Russians in so their sons could get conscripted into the Russian army? You really think they would do that?
Trevor, thank you so much. We need to move along now to number 5, why Putin invaded Ukraine. I'll start with this proposition. It's because he selflessly wants to take down the globalists, Schwab, Soros, Gates, and Fauci because we failed to do it, and he's selflessly doing it for us. Is that the reason?
No, the reason is because the Russian Chinese agent, Joe Biden, is in the White House. And
Sorry, say that one more time.
The Russian Chinese agent, Joe Biden, is in the White House.
Wow, okay.
Joe Biden was elected by a group called the Council for a Livable World. He's worked with them his entire career. That was set up by a Soviet spy called Leo Szilard to elect left-wing senators. They've elected over 200 of them into the US Senate so they could gut the US military. That's why Biden is now taking our nuclear weapons off the table. That's why Biden wants to cut our Navy size in the next budget. Biden has always worked to destroy the US military. That's also why he is purging the military of the people we need right now. And that's why his good buddy Obama purged 200 good generals out of the military. This attack, what Putin's doing in Ukraine is he's working with Xi, he's working with North Korea, and he's working with Iran. They are all going to move together because they know that America can hardly fight a one-front war, let alone a four-front war, and they have their man in the White House who is not going to do a damn thing to stop them, who's going to encourage them. Biden just gave Afghanistan to China. He told Putin to go into Ukraine, basically. He's their man.
Trevor, the way that Biden handled Afghanistan, I think even a 6-year-old knows that you take the equipment out before you take the personnel out. Was that, I think that was a malicious, calculated thing that Biden did. Was that a signal to Putin to saying, hey, you guys do whatever you want?
That is a signal that the world balance of power is about to change in favor of the evil axis. You know, see, China had an American base on its western flank. Afghanistan was run by America. So if China wanted to attack Taiwan or the Philippines or whatever, they would have a big problem on their western flank with an American base. India had a buffer. India had a buffer between China and India. So now that Afghanistan now belongs to China effectively, with all the military hardware, all the rare earth minerals, India is now vulnerable, and they're probably going to pull out of the Western alliance. Trump was good with India. Trump was working with India and Japan and Taiwan and Australia to take down the Communist Party of China. And what a boon that would have been to the world, right?
Yeah.
The
That's why they
China
had to get,
liberated. That's
they
why
had
they
to
had
get,
to get rid of Trump.
they, they had
So
to get rid
now,
of,
see, all this aggression was, but Ukraine's just step one. They were going to do all this aggression under Hillary Clinton, but
mm,
she didn't get elected. So they had to wait till Trump was gone. And now they're going ahead with the program. This is the kinetic stage of World War III. That's what we got to
scary
understand.
stuff.
We lose Ukraine, we're going to be fighting wars all over.
Sort of like Hitler taking Czechoslovakia. Yeah. Trevor, we're going to go to number 4 now, the biolabs. So look, a person kind of looking at what's going on in the world, something going on in Wuhan, the labs, Fauci, Gates, New World Order people messing with these viruses, these experiments. Then it appears it was released on purpose and they're doing all this evil stuff. Now we're hearing of these biolabs in Ukraine. It all kind of sounds like the same thing. Soros, Schwab, Fauci, they've got these biolabs in Ukraine and Putin's going in to take those labs down, take those biolabs down. That's what it's kind of sounding like, and a lot of American conservatives are getting behind it. But wait a minute. Russia set up those labs. Russia has the largest bioweapons program in the world. Something's not adding up here. What do you make of it?
Right. Russia had the world's largest, and still does, the world's largest bioweapon program. They're weaponizing anthrax, plague, everything, every disease you can think of. So when the Soviet Union broke up, many of those biolabs were still in Ukrainian territory. And so the Americans were faced with a problem. We better go in and take these things over and keep them going and paying the people. Otherwise, we're going to get thousands of scientists going to Iraq, going to Iran, going to North Korea, where they can work on their bioweapons programs and basically unleash chaos across the world. So they went in, Europeans and Americans went in and funded those labs, took the Russian labs over, turned them to peaceful purposes, investigating crop diseases, and I'm sure monitoring the Russian bioweapons program as well. But, you know, and I can understand people freak out. We've just been attacked by communist China. We've had this massive pandemic, and people are spooky about this. This is a clever piece of Russian propaganda. Those biolabs are Russian. We turn them to peaceful purposes. Yeah. Look, if Putin was really worried about biolabs, why isn't he invading China?
You make a lot of sense, Trevor Loudon. Number 3, we've already mentioned it. Is Putin a Christian? And so, look, my background, my family, we know quite a bit what's going on there. It doesn't take a genius, but we have some personal experience. My godfather, Father Mian, was killed by the KGB. These are monstrous creatures over there in terms of the KGB. And there's nobody really in the authority of the Russian Orthodox Church that's not a KGB agent. This is all theater. Putin's posing as this Christian. Look, these are KGB monsters. They're engaged in blasphemy. This is all window dressing. It's incredible anybody buys into this. But a lot of them are. What do you think about this whole thing of Putin being a Christian? And a lot of evangelicals and conservatives in the West are really, they've got Stockholm syndrome with this thing.
Look, absolutely. And there's been a 15 to 20-year program. They set up all these conservative family values organizations. They started inviting American Christians to conferences in Georgia and Russia. And Putin's going to stamp out the gays. Putin's going to stand... He's going to bring Christianity back to Russia, and they lapped it up. As you said, the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill is a KGB agent. He was appointed as a KGB agent to run the church. You know, the Orthodox Church is run by the the Russian intelligence services. Putin goes to, gets photographed with the cross. He gets photographed with the Pope. He gets photographed at a baptism. This is all for Western consumption. When he brought 30,000 young kids to the conference in Sochi, Russia in October 2017, they weren't Christian kids. They were communist kids there to celebrate the Bolshevik Revolution. This is designed to suck in people, and I know them, some of these people who will tell you Putin's a lion of Christianity. Putin is, fulfilling biblical prophecy by going to Ukraine. Putin is a family values man, a man who his troops are now raping and pillaging through Ukraine. This man's a Christian. It's absolute garbage. Yeah. I've got him on tape saying, talking about how Christian, this is an interview he did recently. Christianity is just like communism. It's really about sharing and equal justice, and Lenin being buried on the mausoleum is just like relics of the saints. That's Putin's Christianity.
Trevor, in our family, our bleeding hearts for Russian Christians and what they suffered at the hands of the KGB, and to have people today that think that this KGB man is a Christian, it's hard to find the words, but one that I'll use is disgusting in terms of the people that believe in this thing.
It's another little point there. In Russia, you only have religious freedom if you belong to the Orthodox Church. Yes. If you're any other denomination, you have to register and you cannot proselytize outside your church. In Ukraine, there's 100% religious liberty, no restrictions at all. Who's got the moral high ground on that one?
Trevor, thank you so much. Very little time left. I wish you had an hour to answer the last two, but please only a minute. We're at number 2 right now. If Putin wins, go ahead.
He'll attack the Baltics, they will fold. He will attack Western Europe, and either Biden will collapse and surrender. Well, but see, at the same time, China and Iran will be going as well, and North Korea, and the Mexicans will be driving millions of people across the border. So, yeah, it's chaos. It's world chaos. If Putin wins this, it's world chaos.
Great. Trevor, in our world today, back in the day when I was a little kid, there was Ronald Reagan, and then on TV and the movies, there was Sylvester Stallone and Chuck Norris. And today, even what you're saying, who's in the White House, it can get very depressing. Now, things will never get that depressing for Christians like me. I'm not sure what your faith is. Our Jewish brothers and sisters also have a reason to celebrate, because whether we believe in Christ like I do, or our Jewish brothers and sisters that believe in the Lord, we're always celebrating because we know He wins in the end and He's always with us. But having said that, are there any good guys?
Well, I think Boris Johnson has stepped up to the plate, quite honestly. I think he's been good. And I do admire Zelensky, I'll tell you, okay. I do. And I think there are lots of good guys in America who are standing up right now. What I see, the real good guys are the Ukrainian people and the American people. That's who I see the good guys here and now, because they're going to change our government, and hopefully the Ukrainians can hold off the Russians, which will save us. So this is our leaders have been letting us down for 50, 60 years now, with the exceptions of Reagan and Trump. I think we're coming to a point where we're going to see great leaders coming through, because we are so close to losing everything. This is the time where good people get off the fence and actually start standing up.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Trevor. Well, you're one of those people, and that was number 1, by the way. The question of any good guys left. We are out of time, but just very quickly, just something that you're stressing, Trevor, because I've dedicated my life to trying to understand all of this, and you have too. And you understand very well the traitors in the West, the traitors in America, the fifth column. And you appear to be saying that we have a traitor in the White House.
I say that unequivocally. Look, what he did in Afghanistan was not stupidity. What he's doing on the border is not stupidity. What he's doing in gutting the military is not stupidity. What he's doing in locking down our energy resources when we need them the most is not stupidity. He is working to Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin's playbook. He is giving them every advantage and so they can do as much damage as possible while America is weak and cannot defend itself.
Yeah.
This would not have happened under Trump. We all know this.
Well, if I ever go to bed at night and I'm feeling a lot of the darkness, I am very inspired by the fact that Trevor Loudon is still out there telling the truth, fighting the good fight. And am I correct in telling all of our viewers that they have to go to trevorloudon.com?
Yes, please do. Please do. We got a great new movie out there too called Enemies Within the Church, which will further educate people, enemieswithinthechurch.com. But look, there's a lot of great people out there standing up. This is a dark time, but the greatest victories come from the darkest times, because that's when good people get off the darn fence and start fighting for their liberty.
Wow, what an inspiration you are. Trevor Loudon, what an honor and privilege it is to have you on the Glazov Gang. Thank you for crystallizing so many truths during this very muddy time. Hope you will come back on our show soon. Good luck to you fighting the good fight, okay?
Thank you very much, Jamie. It's been a great pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. Go to trevorloudon.com even before watching the Glazov Gang. Get his book, White House Reds, and follow everything Trevor is doing and support him. And we'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I recently got one of Mike Lindell's pillows and comforters at mybillow.com, and I started getting some of the most restful sleeps in my life. And you can do the same. Go to mypillow.com and use code GG21 to get incredible and amazing discounts. Or just call 1-800-854-0673. While you're doing that, you'll know that you're supporting Mike Lindell, a true American hero fighting a true American cause. And you'll also be supporting the Glazov Gang. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless America.